I like this group, Jeff. I was born and raised on a 50-cow dairy in Ashtabula County. We milked cows up until 2010. As with many in Ashtabula County, there were a lot smaller farms. I know the farms over here are considerably bigger, but that was my background. And then I'll kind of weave some of that in. So as long as you don't know anybody from Ashtabula County, I'm probably safe talking to you. Now, but if you do, I'm just going to protect and change names as we go. But I thought I would start out with just a few situations and then kind of just want to give you some things to think about. And we'll go as long as it's not locked up. So my background for the whole farm succession comes from the things that I saw growing up, whether that's from our farm, and we could go for the next hour just on the dysfunctionality of what happened to our dairy farm. In the workshop, we actually go through that a little bit. But just to give you some pointers to think about as you're making the farm succession plan. So maybe I should ask, how many of you have a plan already in place? A written plan, I should say, a plan in place. All right, do any of these situations, just give you some food, and this is not saying anybody in the room, but these are all Ashtabula County people or Coshocton County people where I'm at now that we could talk about. But is this your grandmother? She's 94, still in charge of the farm accounts, and will be until the undertaker takes them out of her hands. Or maybe this, our name for my grandfather was Grumps. We didn't call him Grandpa, we called him Grumps because he was grumpy. Does your grandfather still make all the decisions for the sons and the grandsons, and it's worked fine for all these years, and there's no need to change? We don't need to do anything but milk 50 cows. That would have been my grandfather. Or we got a very male-heavy crowd here, right, Debbie? But we know that the statistics say that our female counterparts will outlive us. So what about my dad died and my mom is now dating the new man? Mom really does not care for the farm, so I'm fearful that she's going to sell her part of it. What do I do in this situation? And I think this is the biggest question that we come up against is, don't worry, kid, this will be all yours someday. So we're going to let you live in that you and your house live in that crappy farmhouse, the old farmhouse that is drafty. We're going to let you live there for free. And this is all going to be yours someday. But no plan's been done. And then, oh, by the way, you have a brother and sister that live in Columbus. They live off the farm. And what do you think is going to happen in the future when mom and dad pass away? Just like this is Robert. He's from Ashtabula County. This was a smaller farm in Ashtabula County, $2.1 million estate. There was no estate plan that was done. Robert wanted to continue to farm. There's 7 of them as siblings. So you start to divide $2.1 million by 7, and that's what? $300,000 a piece, right? So if he has 6 brothers and sisters, if he's going to have to buy out the brothers and sisters to keep farming, how much money did Robert have to come up with? $1.8 million. Have you priced a $1.8 million life insurance policy lately? Guess what happened to this farm? The neighbors own it now. The neighbors own it. Already to have a train wreck coming, no one needs to know until I die what is in my plan. That was my grandfather. I don't think we can make money milking cows anymore. Maybe that's the son that's saying that. And the question that we'll get on the way to the restroom, but no one's going to ask it here, or maybe you're welcome to. I don't trust my daughter-in-law. So what's going to happen when I die and the first thing she does is divorce my son, and then she wants to take half of the farm? So how do you mitigate for that? So is there a train wreck coming? I think sometimes that most of us feel like this person, we're the ones holding up the train from wrecking. I actually had a guy ask, well, what do you think killed this shrub? If you look at this picture, what actually killed the shrub? I think we got to know it was a train wreck that killed it. So why don't we plan better for the future of our business? This is the participatory part of today's talk. Why don't we plan for the future better? Why don't we talk about this? Yeah, you're busy, number one. Farmer, and especially if you're all dairy farmers, I've never seen a dairy farmer that's not busy. Not sure what we want to do as far as the family, that kind of thing, of who. Maybe we don't even know what the kids want to do yet. Maybe the kids are not old enough to make that decision. Maybe things are going to change. We don't know. What else? Yeah, this is a hard. Have you talked to mom and dad about life after when they're dead? I mean, I just trying to talk to my grandfather about death, or talk about anyone. You know, Easter will be here before we know it. You want to have a really cool Easter, just start talking about everybody dead in the family around the Easter dinner table and see how that goes. Might spoil the Easter dinner about, hey, mom and dad, what's going to happen to the farm after you're gone? With your brothers and sisters all around the table. Not a fun conversation to have. I want to recommend that. I think there's some other strategies we can do. What else? So we don't have time, don't know what to do, uncomfortable conversation. Yeah. We'd like to know what you've got planned. Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. It's a conversation, especially if I'm the next generation. I need to know, but I'm not allowed to know yet. Kind of go back to one of those slides, right, Debbie? What else? Other things that you can think about?
It all changes monthly depending on which one that want or don't want.
Right. And what happens if we're always thinking ahead, what's going to happen if Sam is married to someone that we don't care for, or what's, you know, then all of a sudden sister who lives in Columbus is now doing more. So now I'm going to change my whole plan because of that. Good. Any other things? Yeah. So the uncertainty of the future for certain. Absolutely. And what's going to happen when the unexpected. We're going to talk about some of the problems that we run up against. Those are all great reasons. I would just say that we started out, I think you said the first thing, right? I understand, especially with dairy farmers, it's going to be hard to find the time. But I guess my question for you is, what's going to be the triggering time to make sure that you have time? We always have time to do other things, but what's going to bring this to the front of the plate? What's going to be your triggering event? Is it coming to something like today's meeting, or is it usually we wait for death? Or for ours, and I'll share you what ours was. My mom and dad had nothing in the works, nothing as a plan. They did a simple will when they were married, which was one of those basic boilerplate kind of things. But this was May 1st, 2010. So I told you I was from Ashtabula County. So about May 1st, that's about when the snow was melting. We never put cows out on grass until about Mother's Day. That was kind of the rule. You put the cows out on grass on Mother's Day. So on May 1st, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So we are just getting into the field, just getting the cows out, starting to get everything rolling in the operation. And when you get a diagnosis with pancreatic cancer, you know that means one thing for sure, right? You're not going to beat it. So here we had, and we didn't know how long we had, and it was 7 weeks. So my challenge, or the trigger for us, was with the diagnosis of that, how do you get the farm prepared to move forward without the person who is the lifeblood, the lifeline of that organization? For us, we were lucky that we had 7 weeks. I will say I just had a friend that their dad just had a massive heart attack and was dead that day. Didn't even have that time to make that preparation. So my challenge would be, if you had 7 weeks to live, would that make a difference to you getting this ready to get it on to the next generation and get things moving? So strategies for getting your farm ready. What have you done with regards to the future? I would hope, and I'm assuming, everybody in this room, your goal is that you'd like to pass it on to an heir to farm, to continue to farm, correct? Regardless, you know, who owns the farm, that should be the goal, to get it on as a farm business, because the farm business, and this is unlike like a plumbing business or insurance business or some other businesses, when they're ready to be done or retire, what do? They sell it out, right? They sell their portfolio to another person in the business. And again, is that an option for farm families? Absolutely. However, in the way we are in the farm world, we would like to see that continue for multiple generations. So when you look about that first question, is how will your heirs operate the farm? Because I believe this is a big driver on how you prep up the next generation. Notice I put 2 circles up there. I think most of us would like to be in that owner-operator side, right? We have a son or a daughter, or it could even be a grandson, or it could be a non-blood relative, what I would call a non-blood relative, a brother from another mother kind of thing, someone who will take on that farm. Maybe it's a person that's worked for us, but they're really more family than the family members that we have. So you have an owner operating. How do you school them up and get them going? Or are you just really in that situation where you think that my kids are never going to farm? I want them to own the asset. So instead of teaching them to be the owner operator, I need to teach them to be the landlord of that property. For instance, I will tell you, when I look at my farm that I own, which was my grandfather's farm, I understand that my 2 daughters, one who's 25, almost 26, that lives in Denver, Colorado, and the youngest who's 19 and who's in college, I think the likelihood of them ever coming back to the farm, and I'll say never, because when you say never, then you end up somewhere where you never thought you would be. I would say it's a 95% certainty that they will never be back on the farm. But can they own that asset and then become a good landlord of that? So my thought is how do I school my girls up to be good landlords? In other words, do they know what a farm lease is? Do they know what a soil test means? Do they know where the property lines are? Do they know all the ins and outs of the property to make them a good landlord to the tenant farmer, and how to choose a good tenant farmer to farm the ground that we have? So my thought process on my farm may be completely different than what you have. And it may change when a grandchild comes along. Let's hope that's not for a while, but think of when a grandchild comes along, there may be a point in the future that a grandchild becomes the owner operator of that farm and not in the landlord position. So I'm kind of keeping my options open. So when you look at this about completing, what's the mission of the farm? When you start thinking about the future, I would encourage, this wintertime, we're going to get a massive snowstorm this weekend, right? Might as well sit around and talk about where we want the business to go. If there are multiple generations in the farm, well, number one, I hope all of you have a mission, what your farm's all about. And if you don't, start there with that and the goals. But if you're bringing that next generation back, what's the income needed to bring that next generation back home? If there's going to be multiple, and if there's multiples of us, how much money is that going to be? Do we actually know what that's going to be? And I will tell you, as you probably already when you become married, your needs for income significantly probably change. Then you throw 2 girls in the picture, they exponentially increase. So being single versus married with kids is a different thing about how much income that you need. All I would tell you is just remember the rule of 72. Does anyone know what the rule of 72 is? Take 72 and divide it by the interest rate. So average interest rate over the last, 30, 40 years has been 4%. So if you use that as a figure, 72 divided by 4, is anyone quick at math? 72 divided by 4 is 18. So the rule of 72 says if you are planning for the future, if you're living on, I'll use an easy figure for me to think about, $50,000. That's your living expenses for your year for 2018 when you do all your figuring. If it was $50,000, that means in 18 years as we roll forward, or so let's say 20 years, just for easy math, in 2039, if you can fathom being in 2039, instead of living on $100 or $50,000, we're going to need to live on $100,000. So as you're looking for growth of your operation, figure at 4% interest rate, every 20 years, the income that you're taking in and putting into your checkbook needs to double. So as you're planning for the future, have you done a SWOT analysis of the key management areas and looking at the strengths, weaknesses? What are some opportunities and threats? We knew in the dairy industry, well, we could talk about the weaknesses and the threats all day long, right? So those are things that I would have you think about. If you could think about in farm succession, you think about all the things in 7 weeks that I had no clue to do, because those are some things that Dad did that we never even thought about because Dad liked to do them. For instance, who goes to the Farm Service Agency to sign up for all the federal programs? Well, that was my dad, because they had chocolate in the Ashtabula office, and my dad had a chocolate fix. So would he ever take any? No, he definitely wouldn't take Mom with him, because then she would know that he was cheating on, because he was diabetic, so she knew he was cheating, right? It's like, why did he go to extension meetings to eat donuts when Mom didn't know? So think about that. In that 7-week period, the first thing Dad had to do was take me with him to the Farm Service Agency office and us sit down together and actually go through the paperwork. And at that time, he signed over the power of attorney to me to make sure I was able to make the federal farm program decision. Think about how many of our young generation has never been in with us to do the operating loan. And if that's never happened, you start to think about these things that I do. Well, how do I start including that transfer of those knowledge? And I just wrote the major areas I think that we have on a farm, right? We have all our cropping system. For the dairy guys, we have all the things that we do with the dairy cows. A lot of the crop and the livestock, as kids, we learn because we're on the hip of our parent, right? Those come naturally. It comes easy with us. The same with I would put the machinery and the equipment repair. We're on the hip with Mom and Dad as we're doing that. Financial management may be something in farm families is held very, very close to the vest, i.e. Mom is the one doing the book, if I'm being stereotypical, and nobody else knows anything about how to do the books or the taxes and that type of thing. So if you had to go under each of those lists, like risk management down at the bottom, that would include making all your insurance decisions. So if you had to go in each area, and this would take you more than this winter to do, imagine if the principal operator had to write down everything that they do on a daily basis or yearly basis, and then go down and check yes or no if the next generation knows how to do it. And I would say, what are the most important things that you would have to school them up on now, and then on the little things that then they can learn it on their own. And we have a fact sheet that we wrote, and that's hard to see, and it might be a little hard even on your handouts to see. But if you're look at the whole farm planning, if you're starting from scratch, there's a fact sheet that I wrote. This has been a few years ago, but this plan, and if you want this, see Jeff or any of the agents that are over here, and it kind of steps you through the whole process of the whole farm plan, whether it's looking at the individual strengths and weaknesses of everybody who's in the farm operation. It's looking at the team as a whole, the family as a whole, and then you're developing your goals and what's going to drive you forward for the future. But the bottom is all those things like the business plan, the investment plan, the retirement plan, the estate plan. All those things work together as you plan for the future. So definitely we have a lot more information on that. I mean, let's face it, dairy, right? We're at a tough time. So you should leave no stone unturned as you're thinking about how you adapt for the future. So as you're doing that, this might serve as one of those guides to do that. I would also suggest if you don't have an advisory board, might be a cool time to put some fresh eyes on what you're doing. So fresh eyes, they can come a sounding board. I would caution you, like with any good boards, don't have them just as yes people that just will come in and say, oh yeah, I think you're doing a great job here. Think about those people that you have that their success is tied to your success. So I'm thinking your nutritionist, your veterinarian, I'm thinking your extension educator, anybody who you think that will come in and help evaluate your farm. And then I think you have a successful board, if they can come into a room and it's no holds bar, they're very honest with you, and they help just have you look at your operation just in a different manner than you might see. Because in a day-to-day business, sometimes it's hard to see some of the things that are there just because we're there every day looking at it. So put some people together and have them come and actually look at it. Years ago, this is years ago, I'm talking 20 years ago in extension, we had a dairy team that would go out and actually do the whole farm analysis. They would come in and actually interview your employees. They would do a whole FinPack analysis of your finances. So they would interview the employees for employee management. They would actually look at your financial analysis, and then they would, a specialist like an engineer and some other folks that had a dairy background would come in and do a walkthrough through your entire operation. And then in the end, what they came back for them is a fresh eye look like, okay, we looked at your finances. That's one snapshot. We walked through your facilities. Here's another thing. Oh, by the way, we interviewed your employees anonymously where they could feel free to tell you whatever, employees and family, and here's what we think on the human resource side. And you add all that together, and it gave the farm families a nice fresh eyes to look at what they're doing. So maybe that's something that you could do with an advisory board or do with your extension folks. So a limited time, but I just want to share why some of these succession things fail. The first is not preparing or teaching the next generation to be able to manage the farm. Think about how you train your son or your daughter to come back in the business. How do you train your employees? And I have two options there that I think would be they might be things that you think about on a daily basis about, okay, how do I start training them up so that you're not under the gun like the 7 weeks like we did? And I would also ask you, do your heirs know the financial position of the business? And can it support their financial needs? There are a couple farms that I'm working with in Coshocton County. Their kids are involved with the farm, and mom and dad have yet to tell them how bad it is. They learned how bad it was when dad told the boys that we're going to put that pasture up across the road and we're going to put it up for sale. Which in Coshocton County is a pretty good thing because #1 deer hunting in the state of Ohio. You have Dale Earnhardt, who owns thousands of acres in Coshocton County, and land is going for about $12,000 an acre just for people to hunt on the acreage. So that's when that's what the kids are finding out, that there's actually some financial problems. And again, if you're bringing people back, or can you get along? We got some young folks here. I would ask you these questions. If you had to take over the farm today, in other words, mom and dad are gone. They're just gone. It happens. What would be the thing that would scare you the most about taking over that operation? Or I should change that a little bit. What are the things that you need to know how to do for you to successfully run that operation? Are there changes that need to be made for you to have a continuing interest in the business? A lot of times I think, even our sons and daughters that are in high school, why aren't we asking them about the things that they think that they're going to want to do as part of the farm business? You might be surprised at some of the things and ideas that they have about changing the farm to meet their personality, and maybe and hopefully in the long run, it's helping your profitability. And what are weaknesses? So the next manager, what are your weaknesses that need to be addressed, and what training do you need to get done now? What would it be for? Would have been for me is for sure to take over the farm was I knew how to fix the stuff that had broken already once because we had fixed it together and I watched my dad. But my weakness is fixing the crap that I don't know how to fix day in and day out because it's a small farm and it's just a lot of junk. How do I fix that stuff? For another person, that might be, you know what? I'm clueless when it comes to record keeping and the financial end. And that's something that my mom did flawlessly. And I know that mom and dad aren't going to be around forever. So if I have to school myself up to then figure out how I do the finances, or maybe after we do our evaluation, maybe we shouldn't even be doing the financial books at home. Maybe it's worth the capital, the money to hire somebody to do the financial books for us. Or maybe that's something that you have an off-farm member of the family that is really good in finances, that they actually do the finances, and that allows them to maintain an ownership and an interest in the farm business that we have. And then hopefully this is the conversation, the last question that the senior generation's having with the junior. What's your expectation for an appropriate time for management control to be transferred? Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? And what chunk should that come down? I've seen some young people go back to the dairy farm, and they're doing the same thing that they did 7 years ago. So I think it's very, very important for when you come back to the farm, and I think we got some millennials in the room, right? And I don't want to bash on are you guys millennials? Or will you? Close? You definitely are, right? And I hate to bash on millennials, but can you imagine telling most of the millennial generation, oh, by the way, you're going to work yourself from the bottom up? Most millennials want to do what? I'm just coming in, I'm coming back fresh from college, and I'm taking over. And that is something that we have to deal with in these farm succession things. How do you do that? But I also will warn you against the son or daughter that comes home and they're still pitching the calf pens because they're at the bottom and they're working their way up, and 7 years later they still haven't worked out a phase one to move up through. So is there a plan for that? I mean, what's your organizational structure? I put some pictures in there. Is it a me structure? Is there no structure? Think about the organizational structure that you have and just put those in there for you to take a look at. Don't give mixed messages as you're doing that. Again, that picture is really, really hard to see, probably on your handouts either, but this is from Lake County, Ohio, up on Route 2, up on the lake. Which side of the street would you want to drive on? Can you see that close? Do you see that it's 60 miles an hour on the left-hand side of the street and 50 miles on the right-hand side of the street? Isn't that crazy? Someone screwed up. Here's two strategies. First strategy, that is a what? You guys are very intelligent because I asked this in Wayne County a year ago and some guy said it was a gerbil. A gerbil. You believe that? That's not a gerbil. So what does a possum do? Possum plays dead. So my advice to the senior generation is to do what? Pick the busiest time of the year and go get the other knee done. Or pick the busiest time of the year, right? Or pick the busiest time and go take a vacation. You just leave a note on the door for the kid and say, well, we'll be back in 2 weeks. By the way, I left my flip phone here, so you can't get a hold of me. Or your bag phone, whatever you're still using, bag phone, flip phone, whatever it is. You leave that at home, and then you're gone for 2 weeks during the busiest time. And then what is the great thing about playing possum? A possum always does what? Comes back alive no matter how many times you hit it with a pitchfork, right? It comes back to life. So here you come back, and then you're able to do some corrective action. So there's a farmer in Ashtabula County, and I'm not going to tell you a name just in case you know it. He went out elk hunting out in the western United States one year, and this has been years ago. So Tim said, well, I'm going to leave the farm, and I'm going to allow Keston to milk. This is like an 80. They were milking a flat barn, 80 cows. So I said, well, not too much can go wrong while I'm out in western United States doing elk hunting. So Keston calls Tim one night and says, they're kicking the living crap out of me. I don't know what's wrong with these stupid cows. It's not one old biddy, but there's every biddy in the barn. She's kicking the snot out of me. Okay, so some of you are old enough. Do you remember the teat dip that was like a white skin? It was a white. We used it on our farm where you would dip them, and instead of the iodine, it was like a white coating. And then when you came back and washed them off the next day, they would just kind of peel off like snake skin, and then you would milk them and you'd go on. I don't know how long it was on the market, but we used it for a while. Well, at any rate, Tim was using that. Well, they ran out of the teat dip concentrate, so he went in under the wash vat, and of course, we know everything that's under the wash vat is labeled really nice, right? All the labels fall off after it gets all wet, so he grabbed what he thought was the teat dip, mixed it up, and proceeded to dip the entire herd that night. You know what he grabbed? Bulk tank acid. And you wonder why the old girls were kicking? Tim said, I can't believe the trainer. You know what happened to milk production? I mean, he recovered. And that, I think that's when he learned that Keston maybe not, dairy farming was not Keston's career choice. But the problem was, I say, my caveat is, I encourage you to play dead, but I want to make sure your kids are ready for you to play dead, okay? I can't tell you how many times after my dad passed away that I would love to have gone back and asked him a question or two on things that I didn't know. So instead of playing dead, maybe you do the 365-day challenge, and that is, there's 365 days in 2019, right? So if I'm the senior generation, my goal is to teach my kids one thing every day. So the people, son or daughter that's taking over the farm, I'm teaching them one thing every day. And if I'm the son or daughter that's on the farm, what should be my goal? Then I'm asking mom and dad without them knowing one thing from the farm. So you add that up, that's over what, 700 and whatever, almost 800 things that you'll learn in a year's time that you never knew. I found out, I never knew that Dad told me never drive the tractor behind the lilac bush in the backyard of Grandpa's house. And I'm thinking, well, he must love that lilac bush because I think it's the ugliest thing. He said, never drive behind the lilac bush. So I'm renting the farmhouse now, and a couple of years ago, they must go to the bathroom a lot more than I ever thought, because they clogged up the whole septic system and it was running back up into the house. So we had to find the septic tank. I had no clue where that stupid thing was. I was out there digging all day trying to find it. You want to know where it is? Right behind the freaking lilac bush. So why didn't my dad say, David, I don't want you driving behind the lilac bush with the tractor because, add those 3 or 4 more words, because I don't want you screwing up the septic tank. But now, one of those things that I've done for my girls, because we found the electric line that went from the barn to the house by accident. It wasn't the shortest distance between 2 points. We were digging up the milk house drain that's not there technically, going out to the road ditch. We were digging that up, and we lit it up because the electric line went in a U-shape back to the house, because apparently, as I thought back, yeah, there was the reason they didn't go straight line between the house and the barn was the fuel tanks were sitting there at one time. So instead of moving the fuel tanks, Dad just ran the electric line in some freaking haphazard method out in the front yard to the house. I didn't know where the freak it was. So what am I doing now for my kids? I have a cell phone, right? So I'm taking a picture when we're digging up all this stuff, and then I'm putting in a notebook, and then even on the septic, I actually took the pictures, and then I took a tape measure out and wrote in this page with the picture, this is how many feet off the corner of the house it is, so that they can find where the trap is to clean it out. So those are the kind of things I'm trying to help my kids with. Or if they choose to sell the house and the farm, they can hand this notebook to the next owner and say, oh, by the way, here's where the clean out is this is where the electric lines are, this is where the natural gas lines are being run, because we know all that stuff. Oh, by the way, here's the entire tile maps to the entire farm. So that would be the first, training them up. Second is communication. We mentioned this about, yeah, it's hard to communicate about this. Kind of like McDonald's, it's hard to communicate about their chicken wrap. Try a new crap. I think it's chicken wrap. All right, maybe you guys have this church out here. Don't let worries kill you. Let the church help with miscommunication. Or maybe you've seen this ad in the daily paper, dog for sale, will eat anything, especially like small children. Just call 888-9999, right? Okay, there's my jokes. We're not known for good communication skills, right? Especially dairy farmers, let's admit it. You know, my dad was happy that, you know, he was an introvert by trade. The only 2 people he talked to was Larry Burt, the AI technician, and Huffy the milk hauler. Those are the 2 people that he would see, that he would talk to on a daily basis. So we're not very good for our communication. And I put a slide in about the level conversations. We're really, really good as farmers talking about level 1 and level 2, i.e., hey, how's the weather? What's the weather going to do like this weekend? And oh, by the way, the next one is, how did your corn and soybeans yield this year? Which we know are always lies, but we're at level 1 and level 2, right? But when we get up to level 3 and level 4 and level 5, this is all, you could do a whole thing just on conversations. So I just throw it out here to think about, what's it going to take you to get up to level 5 where you can have open communication, total honesty, mutual understanding. In other words, we could sit in the room and tell each other exactly what we think without holds bar. We could look at the sun and say, you know what, I don't trust the choice that you made as your marriage. I know for certain that she's going to divorce you and she's going to take half this farm. Could you have that honest dialogue with your mom and dad or your son and your daughter. And I will say, if you're lucky to have one or two people in your life that you can get to a level 5 conversation where you can tell them anything and then you can be totally honest with them. So what's it going to take to get to that in those conversations? In our full day program, we talk about the barriers to communication. We address these to talk about, but if what I would encourage you to do is find out what are the barriers to communication. We know it's not easy. We know it's busy on the farm. We know there's a lot of stress. We know that we have a hard, and I think probably the third one, I think, is probably the part that we have the hardest trouble with, and that's the mixed role. Because as children, we were taught to do what to our parents? Not to annoy the crap out of them, but it's to obey them, right? So when we're in a farm business, in what situation does dad have his dad hat on, and when does he have his business hat on? Are you business partners? Are you mom and dad, son and daughter kind of thing? And which role are you in when you're making decisions? I think that's the hardest thing, especially for the senior generation, is to stop being mom and dad and to start being business partners with the son or daughter that's back on the farm. And we know we have weird languages on the farm. Personalities are different. There are huge differences in generations in how we work. And then there's huge differences in genders. If those are one of your issues, then in extension, we can help you go through some of those issues and help you identify. Number one, after you've identified them, we can help you address those. And we could have those discussions all day long. And I have a story for every one of those, but we don't have time today about my screwed up family. And I would hope that you're writing down all the elephants in the room. What are the things, and if you want to share your moral, what are the things that nobody wants to talk about in your farm, about your family? What are the things that you, because I'm going to challenge you, when you start to do your estate plan, you better have a list of everything that you're concerned about when you go into your attorney, and you better be upfront and honest with your attorney. Your attorney is like a preacher. You can tell them anything that you want, and you want them to know. When I had my tractor time, I walked into my attorney, and I handed him this list and said, this is what I'm concerned about. My number one concern was, I've seen a divorce in our family and what it's done. And there's no way that I want my brother-in-law, who may be an ex-brother-in-law someday, to ever own part of the Marison farm. Number one. Number two, I have one daughter who is not very fiscally, how would we put this, savvy. So if she were to inherit a $500,000 farm, what do you think would happen to that $500,000 right away? It would not exist. So are there ways that you can protect your kids from themselves? And the answer is absolutely. The lawyers can do that. And in my trust documents, I do that. I also then, so maybe I have a son or daughter that I know is not making good life decisions when it comes to money. You can actually put those parameters in there. What are those things that what happens? And here's what I just recently got remarried. So my thought before that was, what happened if Emily and I were in a car together, we were both in an accident, and then I would die immediately, and then she was laid up in the hospital for a month, so then my assets go to her according to my will, and it all goes to her, and then she dies a month later. She has 2 minor children under the age of 18. So those children then, of course, if mom dies, guess who then is their sole provider? Is her ex-husband. So if I die, my estate goes to Emily, and then she dies, and her estate goes then to who? Her kids. So guess who got my entire farm? Her ex-husband. Do you think I want her ex-husband squandering away at the family farm? So I put that on my list, and I said, this is one of my concerns. This was even before we were married, and the lawyer said, we got you covered. Don't worry about that. It's not going to happen. So because I thought about all those things that could go wrong, the lawyer was able to identify those as we made our plan. I'm worried about, I would be worried. My mom was 70 years old when my dad passed away. You know what I was really worried about? Was not about one of us kids getting remarried. Here's what you should be concerned about is when dad dies and mom's 70 years old and then she gets remarried. This happened to my grandfather. My grandma died in 1962. He was smart enough. There was 3 boys, adult boys, which were the Marison boys. There were 3 girls. My grandma Ida Mae had 3 adult girls. It was like the Brady Bunches coming together. My grandpa made my grandma sign a prenuptial agreement back in 1962 that the girls and her would never get the family farm. It would continue through the Marison generation. Can you believe that? Back in the 1960s? Smart. I mean, he may have been grumpy, but I didn't tell you, he was smart. Smart as a whip. So, what's that? So, think about it. You don't think about. You would say, "Oh, if I pass away before my spouse did, would they ever get remarried?" You know what? My mom will probably never get remarried, so it's probably not a concern. But I've seen farmers, they lose their spouse, and within 3 weeks, they're remarried. 3 weeks. Yeah, I'm far enough way home, I can say that, 3 weeks. Yeah, now they're divorced after 4 years, and they're in their 80s. So we got some issues there. So improving family communication, I would encourage you to identify the stressors. Every one of your family is different, but the thing you have to do is identify them. What are your communications barriers? Until you actually are honest with yourself to identify what these barriers are, you're never going to take time to address them. And let go of history. My twin sister can remember everything from the back to the time that we came out of the womb. I'm serious. She can remember everything. Me, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. So if there was something that I did to offend her 13 years ago, she knows it. Heck, she could have offended me yesterday, and I'll never have a clue what it's about. So are you able to let go of some of that history? How many of you were in 4-H and FFA? What was the premise of 4-H and FFA? We knew how to run a good meeting, right? How come we're in FFA and we're in 4-H? We run a good meeting because it conducts business really well, but then we get into a family business and we never have a good meeting. We never have a meeting that starts and ends on time, that is run under proper order. Heck, we don't even meet. We're lucky to meet at the beginning of the day to decide what we're going to do on our daily time, but do we ever get together just to talk about taxes, farm succession planning? Do we have a meeting on analyzing which new planter to buy? If we're going to get robotic milkers, have we done a whole business analysis and a family meeting on that? So why aren't we doing that if that's what we were schooled up to do in 4-H and FFA? Just a question. Unexpected. How are you going to address each of those? I could make even a bigger list, but think like my dad, death of a key manager, divorce, 40% of all marriages in the state of Ohio end in what? Success. Thank you. Thank you. Success. 60%. Isn't that's staggering? Yeah. Legally, they have not. Yeah. 60%. That may take the rest of the afternoon to define that. So 60% of all marriages are now ending in a divorce in the state of Ohio. So do you have a plan in place about that? I am a proponent, though people don't like to hear it. In every change of marital status within a farm business person, the major people that were within the farm business, any change of marital status should include a prenuptial agreement. I don't care if that's mom and dad. I don't care if that's son or daughter. I don't care if that is grandson. But any change in marital status, if it would have an impact on the farm business, because your major goal should be to protect the farm asset and keep it at farm business. You're not going to do that once you start multiplying everybody's marriages in the family and understanding that over half of them are going to have a divorce. So long-term care is another thing. Nursing, how much does it cost to stay in a nursing home every month? Okay, 7 times 12 is what? 80, yeah, a big farm a year, right? 84. What's the average nursing home stay? 3 years. So if we round up to 100 grand, 100 grand times 3 is what? 300 grand. Where are you going to come up with 300 grand if somebody has to go into the nursing home? Or is that a risk that we've identified and you said, you know what? We're going to roll the dice. And the kids are going to take care of whoever's in the nursing home as long as they can. And if that doesn't that doesn't impact, then maybe we have to sell some land, but that's something we're going to roll the dice. But there is long-term care insurance out there, just like there's life insurance. But is that something that makes sense for you to buy? I can't answer that question. The only thing that I can urge you to do is let's account for that as we're thinking about crap that could happen. Medical costs, lawsuits. Who would have ever known this whole thing globally with China was going to creep up in 2018, right? Does that have an impact on profitability? Absolutely. So how are you positioned for the unexpected? I love this one, treating heirs equally in an unequal situation. Remember this? Was that equal? Absolutely. Was it fair to Robert, who was on the farm? Not at all. So my question for you as business managers, how are you going to calculate the value of the son or daughter who stayed on the farm? And can you do that? And I wanted to ask the question if I didn't have an answer, and the answer is absolutely yes, you can. I am not a proponent, however, of saying, don't worry, kid, you're going to work for less today because this is all going to be yours someday. Because then have you actually done the mental math about that sweat equity that you're asking the son or daughter to have? And there are ways, looking at net worth and balance sheets, that from an economic side, you can actually track the growth of the business from the time that the child came back, and actually track it. And then if you're honest, you can say what kind of this growth was attributed to my son that came back, and what part of this growth is because of what mom and dad did on the farm. You can actually go through that exercise. I will tell you, and I think I'd share this not because I think it was really something cool that my mom did. So for 13 years, from the time that I moved back to Ashtabula County to the time that I sold the cows because dad had passed away, I milked cows every morning for 13 years for my dad. Included weekend help, mornings, evenings, every weekday I milked the cows because he was a late riser, so I'd have the cows milked, and then he did the evening thing, and my extension stuff was at night. My family time was at night, but I helped out in the morning. But I never asked for any pay. What was the reason that I did that for my dad? No, actually, no. It's because I love my dad. And secondly, because my dad said any good county agent worth their salt would keep his feet in the boots and actually do something instead of go just be at the office. So he said, if you want to be a good county agent, you need to know how to work. So which he had already taught me, but that's why I did it, purely for the love of my dad. So never asked for anything. I don't think my late wife really appreciated that. But for me too, part of that was that milking cows in the morning for me was a stress relief, because I'm an introvert, which means after I'm around people all day, it sucks the life out of me. So I need some way to recharge. So every morning I got to recharge because I was with the cows. And dad wasn't there. I was by myself. I recharged and then went to work. When my dad passed away, the original grandpa's farm, which is the original 70 acres farm, my mom said, David, for all the work that you did for your dad, never asked for anything, I'm giving you that farm today. And she handed me the deed. Said, here's the 70-acre farm. There it is. It's yours. So I penciled out the money. And you know what that equaled? So this was about sweat equity. If you actually did the price per hour that they would have had to pay me to work, it equaled the value of that farm for those times that I milked for those 13 years. So my mom leveled the playing field between the three of us kids by eliminating that sweat equity or that free labor out of the picture when my dad passed away. I thought it was one of the coolest things. Now, how are my sisters with that? You should ask that. And my sisters, surprisingly, were cool with it because they understood what was going on, because they knew what I was doing for dad while I was there. And they didn't want to milk. No, they left home as soon as they could, right? They got out of Dodge as soon as they could. So how are you doing that compensation? And you can do it. And my wife wouldn't drink unpasteurized milk, so Could I drink milk during? Yeah, but I love that Mountain Dew thing too much. So I was chugging Mountain Dew to stay awake, not drinking milk. So use a cookie cutter estate planning approach. I think this is the biggest problem. If you ever go in an attorney's office and say, don't worry, Jeff, I have a plan for you. Right here it is. You know the first thing you should do? Thank you for your time. And there's no attorneys in here, right? Thank you for your time and walk out. Because you don't work for the attorney works for you. So you need to go in.
Do they know that?
They should. And if you go to one that, I would tell you what, I would say use a professional that understands farming. And in today's day and age, and I'm a all you can be local kind of guy, use your local services, except for when it comes to a major thing like this. Like if someone's doing heart surgery on me, am I going to use my local physician? I'm going to the dude that really knows what he's doing. Same with farm, attorney, legal issues. I'm going to an attorney that knows ag law. And there's a whole list of them that Peggy Hall, our ag attorney for OSU, has. And Jeff or any of the folks here can get that for you. I felt comfortable because when I went in there, they understood, number one, what farming was about. And number two, they listened to my concerns. And then we crafted the plan based on what I needed to be done. And I understand in about 5 years, I'm going to be paying them some more money to revamp that plan because nothing's going to be perfect because life has already changed since the time that I got it done. So don't use a cookie cutter approach. Use someone who is there in the business. Estate planning, though, shouldn't be a big deal on you. And I put this slide just so you know it. Each of us in this room can transfer $11.2 million to our heirs without paying a cent of federal estate tax, or in Ohio, any Ohio estate tax. So as a married couple, that's $22.4 million. If this tax legislation runs out in 2026 without any changes, it reverts back to $5.5 million per person. So if you're a married couple and you plan on living past 2026, as long as your estate's less than $11 million, that hard part about avoiding estate tax is not going to be in the picture. And I would encourage you to do this. Ask your kids what they think. Another cool thing that my mom did for us is that she gave us, after Dad died, 60 days to write her an email. She didn't want to talk to us. She wanted us to write her an email. 60 days, we each had to write her an email that said, if we were the ones that owned that 500-acre farm, what would we do for the estate plan? She got that from the three of us kids. And then after she took that, what we said, she took her 40 years of marriage with my father, and then she went in and sat down with the attorney and came up with her plan. So did she use everything that her son told her? No, in fact, there was a couple things I said, are you freaking crazy that I would do that? And said, hey, you asked. I'm just telling you, that's one thing that it wasn't anything about me. It was something different. But I don't know what my sister said. I don't have a clue. But I know my mom felt really good about getting her plan done. You'll be surprised when you ask your kids some of the things that you'll get back that you never expected. Some of the fears that we have of the future, your kids will relieve those fears because they'll actually maybe tell you something completely different. So I think that's really cool that you could do that. And then ask your attorney, this is not about this, but there's 100 different ways to do this. Will-based, trust-based. I thought I was going to go in and have an LLC with a simple will and transfer it that way. But I ended up, because of all my crazy scenarios, I went to a trust that allows me to protect my concerns. So I would encourage the on-farm heirs to be the ones that get the operating assets. I think most attorneys will tell you, keep the off-farm and the on-farm heirs separate. Don't make the on-farm heir own the operating capital. In other words, the cattle, the machinery, with the off-farm heirs. Now, if you want to put the land in some mechanism where they own that together, and then the off-farm heirs get a rental payment back, that's fine. But think about how it's going to affect the long-term operation. And then think about how you're going to protect it from the oh crap things. So like the nursing home, divorces, death, those kind of things. And then your guys are all dairy farmers, so I assume you're not going to retire, so I don't need to spend much time on that. But really, when it comes down to it, the only thing that I put this slide up there for you to think about is if you're counting on Social Security to be your mechanism of retirement, should there be caution for that? And there should be caution, even if you're thinking about what is it going to look like in the future. Your caution should just be on the average couple today is just under $2,500 a month pulling in for Social Security, which gives you $30,000 a year basically to live on. So my question is, if you're living on more than $30,000, where and who's going to pay for the extra amount of money that you're going to need to live on? And that example shows something that they're going to live on $50,000. So it basically says, where are you getting the other $18,000? And a lot of the times, where does that extra retirement money come from that they're not getting from Social Security? It comes from the farm. And does the farm and does the future generations know that's where retirement's going to come from? We have a nice little handy book thing to do a summary of your assets. And so we're closing here, but I just want to share with you about the way I did this. And if you want this emailed to you, you can sign up, or any of the agents will have this. There is a notebook. If you do one thing this winter, especially you because you're laid up, if you do one thing, you get this and it lists all your assets that you have. It asks every question that an attorney is going to ask you as far as things that you're going to get. Ask you about spouses, ex-spouses, and ask you questions. Then you start answering these estate planning questions. And then when you get to it, it starts, the major things, power of attorney. Who gets to pull the plug on you? You guys made that decision? I got one sister that would pull it before it was even plugged in, right? You all have that, right? And those are tough decisions, I'll tell you. I even put in here after doing a couple of these workshops, and I saw this with my great uncle James. He passed away, had no survived heirs. You know who was the most upset about Uncle James, my great uncle James dying? It was the farm dog. So my question, who's taking care of the farm dog when it's all said and done? So here's what I've done. You go through and you answer all this. And then if your family is like my family, you hide everything, right? On top of, everything, the deeds are hidden everywhere. So I did this. It's hard to see that. So these covers here, every titled asset that you have, you either stick the original in here or a copy of it, and then you start gathering. And now's the time to do it because you're getting all your life insurance statements, all your retirement accounts, all your financial things, and you start putting in here. You can save a ton of money by having this all in a book where you take into your attorney, because they're gladly going to go do a title search for you at the cost of $250 an hour or $300 an hour. If you have it all set, you can save yourself. I asked Robert when I did it, how much money did I say? He said $2,500 just for me, for what I did. Into that notebook was $2,500 from what I saved. And I would say encourage you. Yeah.
Where do you store that notebook?
Man, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Generally.
It has. Okay, so my notebook right now is this thick because it has all my title work. It has everything. So it's that thick. It's not in the safe deposit box. I have it in a.
Who knows where it's at?
My attorney and my two trustees. So I have a trustee that runs my financial side of things. That is my current spouse. She's the trustee, and then I have two backups. Okay, so I have two backups because if we die in a car wreck together, I needed to have somebody. And then on the farm, I have a brother from another mother who's the trustee of the farm, and then I have two backups. My entire document here is in a gun safe, fireproof gun safe in my basement. Now, I heard another person that I know made copies of this. So it's important that the executors of the estate, your trustees or your executors, know where everything is instead of going and searching for it. someone else just made copies of it, and then they took all the originals, like all the deeds and the titles, and they put it in a safe deposit box. And then there's instructions on where the key is hidden actually in here. So mine is set up to where mine's all in the original notebook, but it's in a fireproof gun safe. And mainly because, could you imagine what the cost of a safe deposit box is for something this? You have to buy one huge one. My bigger concern. Right. So, and then in my safe deposit box, there's 2 people that are already signatures on the account. They go get the key, they can get in, and it's all. But I heard a guy in West Virginia said that backfired on them because they had it, and the aunt was the signature on it, and apparently Grandma and Grandpa had been buying gold bars and silver bars and wiped it all out and said there was nothing in the box. And then here last year, she built a brand new $500,000 house on the lake for someone who had no money. So yeah, someone needs to have authorization, which the courts can open it up for you, but it's better if they can go in, especially for a trust. I will say, and I'll share, I decided to do a trust, but I would encourage you to think on the outside the box. The farm that I own is my grandfather's farm. It's the original farm. It's the family farm. So I was thinking of what, I know my 2 girls at this point in their life, if I were to die today, you know what happens to the farm? For sale. It'd be, I wouldn't even be done, and there'd be a for sale sign in the. So I'm thinking, I don't know about that. So I'm thinking, but I still want them to be heirs because you never know. And then I have 2 sisters, which I got the sweat equity for the farm, but to me, my sisters are part of that farm. So I have my 2 daughters, my 2 sisters become owners of the farm trust, and then there's a 5th person. And the 5th person is a brother from another mother. His name is Kevin. He is not a blood relative. He's kind of like 4th or 5th cousin through the whatever. So he worked with my dad since he was in 7th grade. He's a local school teacher. He actually farms part of my mom and dad's ground, but he is like a brother to me. In fact, I'm closer to him than I am to my 2 sisters. So the brother from another mother is actually the 5th owner of the trust, of that trust farm. And then Kevin gets to farm the ground up until the point he doesn't want to. And there's provisions on how it gets sold if it ever has to get sold. But it has provisions in there. If my sister dies, her husband doesn't get it. But if my older sister dies, my niece and nephew get her portion. But if they get married, their spouse can never own the farm. If something ever happens to it, it comes back to the trust in. So I'm going to legislate it for a generation from the grave. And there's provisions for other things, but I tried to think about what I was concerned about. And my big concern was more divorce or the auction sign going up in the front yard right away. I've made it more difficult for them to do it. So I guess my question is what's it going to take to get it done? What triggering event? So 2 years ago, us in the room were sitting in a pesticide recertification in 2016 in December, and I left early to go teach one of these workshops, a series of these down in North Carolina, and I got on a plane. And we were popping out of Columbus, and this whole plane, we're taking off, and it was a day like today, and the plane just starts bouncing all around. Just shaking like out of control. And I'm sitting there, I wonder what's going on. And then I happen to look out my window, and there on out the window, this engine was completely on fire 2 rows back from me. I'm thinking, well, the dude has a rear view mirror, right? All he has to do is look back, see it's on fire, cut it off, and we'll limp back to the. Well, they were actually really concerned about the hydraulics of the whole plane being out. In other words, the landing gear. So they were thinking we're going to do a belly dive coming back in. Well, I gave my observations was, well, we have a 50-50 chance of this thing actually landing. That was my quick aeronautical engineering degree that I don't have, thinking we have a 50-50 chance of this thing actually landing. So, but I was sitting on that plane, and you wonder how you're going to react if you're in that kind of situation. And I learned some new cuss words from the gal in front of me, and I learned how much that lady could cry, and I learned how calm and cool and collected airline stewardesses are under pressure, which they are. And I was thinking, you know what, if this plane crashes today, I'm good. You know why I was good? Because I had everything done. I had everything done. I knew exactly where I stood with everything. I knew everything was going to be okay. And I thought, wouldn't that make great headline news back in Ashtabula County? County agent dies in fiery crash. And that would probably make the news, right? I thought that would be a cool way to go out. But if you are going out tomorrow, are you going to be ready for that? And if you're not, get it done. And I share these quotes for this and put a couple other things in there, but I share these because I have to. Procrastination is not just avoiding a task, it's avoiding the emotions that accompany an uncomfortable task. The measure of one's character is not what they get from their ancestors, but what they leave their descendants. And the final ones, I still find the days too short for all the thoughts I want to think, all the walks I want to take, all the books I want to read, and all the friends I want to see. 3 quotes. My dad was a dairy farmer, just like you guys in the room. When my mom went to get my dad's suit to bury him in, she reached in the left-hand pocket, and these were 3 quotes that he had written down in his handwriting that were in his pocket. So what's my dad telling you to do? Get it done. Get it done. And this was just a good reminder for me that, yeah, we in agriculture, we need to keep talking about this issue so that we're prepared for the next generation to take over. So I will say with Jeff and Sam and Danny and Debbie, you have great educators over here that are able to handle some of these tough discussions that you have. I mean, I would encourage you to utilize the brains that you have in this room. And if there's any way that I can assist in that process, I would love to be able to help you. Dairy farms in my world rank number 1. So anything that we can do to help you, I would encourage you, if you are thinking about this seriously, then Denny's program is 2 weeks from today. Exactly 2 weeks from today. So if you want to go to that, you're going to hear more of my crazy stories. You'll hear some of the same, but you're going to hear them all over there in Salina. So I would encourage you to do that if you have time to do that this winter. So with that, any questions? Or Jeff, I'll turn it to you, either one. Yeah. Yeah, I think the cool thing is you actually find out how things are titled. I see a lot of kids run around from bank to bank in town thinking to find out if their parents even had an account there. Or they look at life insurance policies and they think there's some life insurance policies, then they go to cash them in. Those life insurance policies were null and void about 25 years ago, but we kept them because it's cool to keep that stuff. And then I will tell you, even my first wife, she passed away, and there was one thing, I thought we were all prepared, but there was one IRA that she had when she got out of college. And I thought we had everything done. Well, of course, when you get out of college, you're not going to put your mom and dad as beneficiaries because you figure that they're going to die before you. So at that point in time, she left her brother as the beneficiary to this IRA account. So when I was going through the whole process of settling Jamie's estate, went and tried to get the IRA, and I was going to convert it to my 2 girls so that they would have it. And they told me, well, you don't have ownership rights to this. It was still in her brother's name. So I had to go and hand the stuff to my brother-in-law. And of course, it's in his name. So guess who gets to keep it? Guess who still kept it to this day? He's my former brother-in-law now. So once you're not in-laws anymore after someone dies, is what I've learned. So yeah, that's what it becomes. So this process and that just gets you to clean up those kind of things to know. And I've mentioned one, and I'll just leave you with this. The word heirs does not always mean it has to be blood, son, and daughter. I mentioned about Kevin. Kevin cares more about our farm than what I could not pick one of my 9 cousins out that would love the farm more than Kevin does. So in my mind, I'm going to pick an heir who ultimately gets to farm that ground that would respect the land to the way that my grandfather farmed that ground. And that's what I was looking for in my heirs. So I use the word heirs, not children, when I talk about estate plan, because your children may be gone long before you are when it comes to your estate plan. So think about that as a whole. Who's going to be the best steward of this resource that I'm leaving them? Because we're only here to borrow the resource anyways. It's really not ours. So think about it in that way. All right, if you need help, these guys can help, and I'm only 2.5 hours away. So